Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel, and welcome to the Chessable Masters tournament in 2020. We are finally in the final stage. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Anish Giri, and I think this is really a clash because there was some tension between Magnus and Anish Giri in the past couple of days because Magnus and Anish Giri faced each other in the League Chess title arena, in which, believe me or not, Anish Giri dared to berserk the game against Magnus Carlsen and won the game. Great thing for Anish Giri. I think he was a little bit provocative on Magnus Carlsen, and I like this provocative Anish Giri. At least he's trying to be more complex. At least he's trying to be more fun, and I really like this new Anish Giri. He's very active also in social media, so he's really a tough guy to beat, and he deserves now to be in the finals against the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So the first game of this first match game ended in a draw. Magnus, I think, had a better position. Now it was Magnus Carlsen who played with the white pieces, so let's check out the game. We have e4 by Magnus, e5 by the berserker Anish Giri, knight to f3 and knight to c6, bishop to b5, the Rui Lopez, and after knight to f6 we have the Berlin defense. And now these days I think the move d3 is the most often played move. Wesley So played also a very nice opening preparation against Magnus Carlsen in this game, lost the game eventually, but you can also check it out. It was from the previous tournament, and I think it's a very nice opening because basically you're forcing your opponent to play the most active move, bishop to c5, but now we play bishop to c6, and after d takes c6 we have now a new position in which black has of course the power of the bishop pair. White relies simply on the more healthier pawn structure. What Wesley saw in the game against Magnus Carlsen did, he allowed his opponent to pin him. Here Magnus Carlsen played something like bishop to g5, knight to d2, bishop to e3 was played, in similar ideas. So in this game Anish Giri played a little bit differently. After knight to c3 he played queen to e7, protecting first his e5 pawn, still keeping this diagonal very open for this for this light square bishop. In the game, Magnus played h3, now preventing the spinning idea because his knight is on c3. So if this bishop would have come to g4, then we could at least have the possibility to play the move knight to d2. So now this h3 move is very necessary in the game. Anish played the move b6, trying to find another way to get this bishop into the game, maybe here through the square a6. So here a3 played by Carlsen, and we have h6 by Giri. We have now queen to e2 and now bishop to d7. Let's stop a little bit what to do here from white's perspective, what to do here from black's perspective. From white's perspective, I think you should really undermine this pressure of the bishop pair. So one of the main strategical ideas to play against the bishop pair is get rid of at least one of these bishops. So then if we get rid of this bishop or maybe this bishop, then we're continuing the game with a slightly advantage, and of course it's the powerful center, it's the more healthier pawn structure. So that's why Magnus played this very common idea, bishop to e3. Forcing now the trades of bishops, and now after f takes e3 it's a normal position in which, okay, white has also double pawns, but white can proceed here with the move d4. If you play something like queen to e3, that was the tricky part of this line, then I believe that black in some occasions could maybe try knight to h5 and then knight to f4, some outposts. It will be very hard for white to kick away then the knight. You see the bishop is aiming against this h3, so that's why it was really necessary for Magnus to take with the pawn, restricting this knight's ability to play. Still, you have some problems here on dark squares, but I think what that white has the really flexibility to castle on both sides, queen side or king side. In the game, Anish played queenside castling, and now Magnus played queen to f2, protecting his dark squares. So Magnus has some dark squares problems, but still a slightly advantage here for white. So knight to e8, here Anish Giri is trying to get use of his bishop, because if we flip the board, I believe that it's something going on here, maybe g6, f5, then really rook to f8, maybe get this knight to d6. This would be, I think, a very common idea here for black, to play simply on the open f file, because the queen is also in the f file. So here Anish Giri with the move knight to e8 is preparing this f5 move. In the game, Carlsen played queen to g3, attacking simply further the weakness on e5. That's why f6 had to be played, and now knight to h4. Also, common idea by Magnus to fix the knight here on f5. Black would be really forced then to give up his light square bishop in the game. Rook to g8, and now knight to f5. We have bishop takes f5, and now e takes f5. We have now a new position in which again white has a better pawn structure, but I like Anish Giri's activity now on the g file. There are now some tactical possibilities, maybe to play g5 immediately, and what Magnus wants to do is, of course, fix the pawn, which is the main space advantage, this pawn on f5. But the position is more simplified. There are now only the queens, the rooks, and the knights on the board, so it's not such a complex game. And you know how Magnus loves these types of positions in which he has maybe a slightly advantage. Basically, the game is about equal, but this is really a game for Magnus. In the game, knight to d6, played by Anish, we have e4, and now queen to f7. The idea behind this move, if we go queenside castling and maybe this knight moves somewhere, then the queen could go here on a2. But also we want to make our plan, this idea to play g5 or g6. Then of course after f takes g6, this rook will come very, very actively into the game. Then we could double up rooks on the g file and attack maybe the g2 weakness in the position. Queen to f2. We have now this idea f5, and Magnus plays simply f takes g5. We have queen to f takes g6 en passant, queen takes g6, and now g4, trying to block really the king side here. The problem is now that if black doesn't react correctly, I think that Magnus could go here into idea knight to e2, knight to g3, and then knight to f5, really fixing the position, fixing the whole king side. In the game h5, very active play here by Anish, trying to crack this pawn chain that white has built here, and now finally queenside castle. We have h takes g4, we have h takes g4, and now queen takes g4, queen takes f6. The position is again more simplified, but again slightly better probably for white, because still we have a direct attack against this weak e5 pawn. Still, this pawn structure is a little bit weakened here. There are also some weak squares around the king, but again, if black plays this endgame correctly, it's of course a drawish position. So queen to g5, Magnus goes again into new simplification. Queen takes g5, rook takes g5, and now a4, preventing some b5 ideas. That's very important to block a little bit further here the queen side. Then again, we're trying to attack maybe somehow here the e5 pawn weakness. In the game, Anish played a5. We have rook to g1, attacking the rook, rook to g8, and now after rook takes g5, rook takes g5, knight to b1. The idea behind this move is again knight to d2, knight to f3, and then again attacking this e5 weakness. Still, Anish Giri has to face this problem of this isolated pawn. So again, only I think a draw is here possible for black. In the game b5, we have knight to d2, we have rook to g3. If you take here, for instance, b takes a4, I don't think that's a problem. You see now the pawn structure suddenly is really weak. All of these pawns are simple targets, are really weaknesses. Although black is one pawn up here, but you look at this pawn structure, these are really bad pawns that can be really attacked by this knight, by this rook, and I think white in this particular position has a comfortable game. So in the game, rook to g3 was played. We have b3, fixing the pawn structure here. B takes a4, b takes a4, and now c5. Here Anish Giri is trying maybe some c4 moves. At least he's trying to undouble his pawns, and after something like d takes c4 or knight takes c4, the pawn structure of whites would be suddenly bad, because we have here now a firm pawn chain. After potential d takes c4, all of these pawns again would be also splitted. There would be also weakness. In the game, knight to f1, played by Magnus, attacking the rook, rook to f3, and now king to d1. The idea is of course to play king to e2, knight to e3, and then maybe knight to d5 or knight to f5. So we want to occupy this weak squares in Anish Giri's position. Anish played, I think, the correct move c4, but now after king to e2, we have rook to f7, and now knight to d2. Here rook to g7, maybe a better idea, I think, for Anish is simply to take here immediately. C takes d3. After c takes d3, okay, still this is a slightly better position for white, but at least you have traded off some more pawns. You have undoubled pawns here. After the move rook to g7, Anish is trying to play much more actively, which I really like because he's playing more bravely now. I think against Magnus, there is a thing about Anish Giri. I think now these days he's the only player who dares a little bit to challenge Magnus. He is provoking him also on the social media. I really like, as I said in the beginning, this new Anish Giri. He's more active, he's more fun, he's really a great guy, and that's why I really liked also this idea to play much more active. Here rook to g7, really trying now to force Magnus to do something. King to f3, here we have king to e7, and now rook to h5. You see now this is again the new problem, again this weak pawn on e5. That's why Anish tried rook to g1. After rook to e5 we have rook to c1. Okay, here Anish found a way to get out of this mess. In the game, Magnus tried knight takes c4, knight takes c4, d takes c4, and now rook to c2. That's what I meant. We have now at least accomplished that the pawns are splitted. These are all now also weaknesses. The king is perfectly fine here. The king can participate in the game, but here Magnus of course takes. After rook takes c4, we have rook to d5, and now king to e6. Here, after the move a5, I think now Anish Giri played the main mistake in his game, which is the move rook to c1. I'm not sure why Anish did this, why he played simply this move. Rook to a4 is perfectly fine. You get going behind the pawn. You wanted to do this anyway, and I think in this particular move, Anish Giri with the move rook to c1 simply lost the tempo. Really, he lost an unnecessary tempo. As I said, rook to a4 is the same idea. We're getting behind the pawn cannot move on. Here rook to c1, and it allows now Magnus Carlsen to go much more actively with this rook. So here Magnus has now suddenly a winning endgame. So after the move rook to a4, it would be, I think, probably drawish position, but now after rook to c1, that was the huge mistake of Anish Giri. Rook to d8, rook to f1. Here Magnus plays king to e2, rook to a1, and you see now this rook can go in front of this pawn. What we want to do is play something like a6, a7. Then if the king moves maybe somewhere here, then to play a check, and then promote here to a8. So that's why Anish had to escape with his king. So we want to bring the king on a position where the king cannot be checked by the rook. So this is the main endgame technique that Magnus is trying here. So he's trying to, as I said, a6, a7, move the pawn towards the a7 square, and then deliver a check, and then, as I said, promotion to a8. So that's why here Anish has to stay maybe with his king, at least here on the c file where the king is protected by the pawn. So a6, we have king to c6, and now a very nice move by Magnus. He moves now the king towards the center. Now there is this new threat. It's this here pass pawn on the e file. So here rook to e1, Magnus goes simply further with his king. We have king to b6, and now you see e5. The problem is for Anish that he hasn't played with his pawn so far, and the problem is he cannot protect both sides on the board. He cannot protect the queen side and also this pawn on e5. The king is a little bit overloaded here, and in the game Anish tried to move c5, and here Magnus finds really a great endgame move. Find really, okay, let's pause the video and try really find the Dvoretsky move. Dvoretsky was really a nice author of many great chess books, especially endgame chess books, so that's why the title is the Dvoretsky brilliancy. And let's find really the winning move here, this winning endgame move for white. Magnus Carlsen, of course, saw this move. He played simply rook to c8. The problem for black is now that if king takes a6, we have the opportunity to take rook to c5, and what we have accomplished that this rook will really restrict this king's ability to participate in the defense here. So this rook on the c file would really cut off this king's ability to play, and now it was after the move rook to f1. a completely winning endgame here for Magnus. Here Anish tries some checks, but it's not a problem. We can simply hide a little bit behind our pawn, and after, if rook to e1 or something happens, then we can simply move further and this pawn will be promoted. So again, as I said, king takes a6 doesn't work because we can simply take this pawn. So after rook to c1, Magnus plays again the accurate move e6, simply pushing further because he's faster. We have c4 and now king to d7, rook to d1, and again you see this idea, we're moving a little bit with our king zigzag, and then if we get a check, then we hide behind our pawn. If this pawn gets attacked, again we have the opportunity to play the move e7. So rook to c1, you see e7, c3, not a problem, king to f7, rook to f1, and now Magnus moves towards the rook. The problem is you cannot do so many checks. If you try rook to e1, let's see a possible continuation, rook to e1, then we can simply promote. That's the main problem. After rook takes e8, rook takes e8, and if you try to move the pawn, then you get rook to c8 and it's game over. So here after the move rook to f1, as I said, king to g6, here Magnus simply moved the king, and here after rook to f1, king to g4, in this position Anish Giri resigns. So great endgame technique, how Magnus simply uses these moments when you play an inaccuracy or mistake in an endgame. This are really his game, sort of. This is really his style, his great endgame technique style, and that's why he is simply the world champion. Anish had some chances. I think he played a good game. He played a very nice, compact game, but made this endgame mistake, and Magnus punished it. And Magnus is now in the lead of the first day of the match game. Leads now with a whole point. Still 2 more rounds to play. We'll see what will happen. If you want to see more games from this tournament and also from other tournaments, you can check out my commented chess games. And if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, you can also check out my best chess games of all time. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.